It began with the kind of confidence only desperation can produce. Off the vast, empty waters of the Indian Ocean, a group of Somali pirates had just seized what they believed was their biggest prize yet, a massive Chinese cargo ship heavy with valuable cargo. For a few moments, they celebrated. This was the sort of hijacking that could change their fortunes forever. But what they didn't know was that 3 Chinese Navy ships were nearby, and the Indian Air Force was ready to provide support. The pirates had walked straight into a storm they never saw coming. Back in 2009, long before this kind of military coordination was routine, Somali pirates were already feared as the kings of the high seas. They operated more than 700 nautical miles from their shore, an extraordinary distance that allowed them to ambush unsuspecting ships far from help. That year, they captured a Chinese cargo vessel with 25 crew members on board, taking it 550 nautical miles northeast of the Seychelles. The European Union's counter-piracy aircraft spotted at least 4 armed men on the deck, but could do little more than track the ship from the sky. It was heading straight toward the Somali coast, and the pirates already held at least 6 other ships in their waters. These pirates thrived during the calmer months after the summer monsoon, when the seas near the Seychelles were less hostile to their small, fast boats. Using larger captured vessels as motherships, they could launch skiffs hundreds of miles offshore, reaching as far as Oman in the north and deep into the Indian Ocean in the south. By the middle of that year, they had hijacked 31 ships, collecting millions in ransom. In October, for example, a Turkish vessel with 23 crew members was released after 3 months in captivity, its freedom bought with a hefty payment. The surge in attacks prompted the Seychelles to plead for international help. Piracy wasn't just endangering ships, it was strangling the island nation's fishing industry, particularly its lucrative tuna trade. Some Spanish fishing boats began hiring former British soldiers as armed guards since their government forbade military protection for private vessels. When the pirates seized the Chinese vessel, known as the Xin Hai, they wasted no time issuing threats. A pirate spokesman, speaking by phone from the hijacked ship, warned Beijing that any rescue attempt would result in the execution of the crew. They claimed to know Chinese warships were nearby and demanded that no risks be taken. Anchored off the Somali coast, the Xin Hai's captors demanded a ransom of $3.5 million. The ship, operated by the Qingdao Ocean Shipping Company, was carrying 76,000 tons of coal from South Africa to India, making it one of the most valuable hijackings in recent history. China now faced a dilemma. Families of the crew wanted a swift military rescue, but Beijing was reluctant to follow the aggressive tactics used by the French and US navies. Instead, they leaned toward negotiation and ransom payment, a method widely used in the Gulf of Aden at the time. There were 4 main reasons for this cautious approach. First, China adhered strictly to international law and was unwilling to enter Somali territorial waters without permission from its recognized government. Second, the Chinese naval presence in the area consisted of just 2 missile frigates and a supply ship, hardly enough for a complex rescue mission, especially without advanced intelligence or surveillance. Third, the Chinese Navy lacked combat experience in such operations, and a failed attempt would damage its reputation. Fourth, any aggressive move risked alarming Southeast Asian nations already wary of China's military intentions in the South China Sea. Despite these limits, China's naval mission in the Gulf of Aden was already significant. Since early 2009, the People's Liberation Army Navy had been rotating ships through the area for 3-month deployments, escorting more than 1,100 vessels from various nations, including Taiwan. Working independently from other international forces, the Chinese fleet at the time consisted of the missile frigates Ma'anshan Type 054 and Wenzhou Type 054A, along with the supply ship Qiandaohu. The Ma'anshan carried 8 YJ-83 anti-ship missiles, HQ-7 short-range surface-to-air missiles, and a 100mm main gun capable of firing up to 12 rounds per minute, while Wenzhou was armed with similar weapons and a helicopter deck for Z-9C naval helicopters used in reconnaissance and boarding operations. The Qiandaohu could supply 500 tons of fuel and 200 tons of provisions to warships, extending operational endurance significantly. Meanwhile, more than 30 warships from 18 countries, including India, were engaged in anti-piracy patrols in the region. The Indian Navy, in particular, had shown zero tolerance, with its warship INS Tabar famously destroying a pirate mothership that threatened it. During the engagement, Tabar fired multiple 76mm OTO Malara rounds and deployed its close-in weapon system, AK-630 CIWS, to disable approaching skiffs without harming hostages. French and US forces had also made daring rescues, such as the French commando operation that freed hostages from a yacht and the US Navy SEAL sniper mission that saved the captain of the Maersk, Alabama. In December 2009, after weeks of tense negotiations, the Xin Hai and its 25 crew members were freed without bloodshed. At 3 a.m. Beijing time, the Chinese naval escort fleet took the vessel under protection, providing medical checkups, food, and supplies before guiding it to safe waters. No weapons were fired during the rescue, but the frigate's radar and electronic warfare suites monitored multiple approaching small boats, while the Z-9C helicopter hovered overhead to deter potential threats. The Chinese government praised the crew and reminded all Chinese shipping companies to steer clear of high-risk zones. For a time, piracy in the region slowed, but it never disappeared completely. Then, in March 2017, Somali pirates made a dramatic return, hijacking a fuel tanker off their coast. The first successful attack on a large commercial vessel since 2012. The maritime security landscape had changed since the early 2000s. China had greatly expanded its naval presence in the Western Indian Ocean, and even opened its first overseas naval facility in Djibouti, a base designed to resupply ships involved in anti-piracy patrols. That same year, Chinese and Indian naval forces coordinated during a high-stakes rescue. The Chinese frigate Yulin, Type 054A, received a distress call from the Tuvalu-flagged cargo ship OS-35, which had come under pirate attack in the Gulf of Aden. Indian Navy warships, including the INS Mumbai, INS Tarkash, INS Trishul, and the fleet tanker INS Aditya, helped relay communications and provided air support. Chinese boarding teams equipped with Type 95 assault rifles, RPG-7 anti-armor launchers, and stun grenades secured the vessel, while INS Mumbai's Super Lynx helicopters provided overwatch using 12.7mm machine guns to suppress potential pirate counterattacks. State media later showed the grateful crew waving Chinese flags in thanks. China's more nationalist outlets, such as the Global Times, framed the rescue as proof of the PLA Navy's growing international role. They argued that while China had been active in anti-piracy operations for years, Western media often downplayed these efforts and instead cast suspicion on Beijing's naval expansion. The coverage stressed that safeguarding sea lanes was vital for China's economic security, and that building a strong navy was both a strategic necessity and a sovereign right. Publicly, China emphasized that its presence in the Indian Ocean was about contributing to global security, much like the US and India claimed for their own operations. Official statements called the Djibouti base a support facility for logistics, not a military foothold. Still, questions about China's intentions lingered, especially given its assertive behavior in the South China Sea, where it enforced its own interpretation of navigation rights that treated military and civilian vessels differently. In at least 2 incidents around this time, Chinese naval forces appeared to use lethal force against pirates. Reports indicated that 2 Somali attackers were killed during an attempted hijacking, likely involving RPG-7 rounds, M16 gunfire, and small-scale explosive charges to disable their skiffs, possibly during the rescue of the Panamanian-flagged Al-Hira by the frigate Hengyang. Such actions suggested a shift toward more decisive measures when negotiations were not an option. China had already demonstrated its capability for distant operations during the Yemen crisis in 2015, when it evacuated Chinese and foreign citizens from the war zone alongside Indian naval assistance. Over the years, PLA Navy deployments in the region expanded to include humanitarian aid, disaster relief, and participation in chemical weapons transport from Syria. Chinese ships even delivered emergency fresh water to the Maldives during a supply crisis. Ships were often escorted by Type 052C destroyers equipped with HHQ-9 long-range SAMs and YJ-62 anti-ship missiles, illustrating China's layered defensive and offensive capabilities in international waters. By 2023, China commanded one of the world's largest navies, with frequent operations near Taiwan, joint drills with Russia, and a growing list of missions protecting its vast global trade network. Piracy in the Indian Ocean had declined sharply, leading maritime authorities to consider removing the high-risk area designation from the waters around the Horn of Africa. Still, experts warned against complacency. While hijackings were down, other dangers had taken their place. Smuggling of weapons and contraband into conflict zones like Yemen remained a serious problem. Environmental crimes, including illegal fishing, threatened regional stability, and in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a narrow choke point linking the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden, militant groups such as the Houthis began deploying weapons once only available to national militaries. Sea mines, limpet mines, anti-ship missiles such as the Noor missile, and explosive drones now posed a growing threat to commercial and naval vessels alike. 4% of the world's oil supply passes through this corridor, making it a tempting target for disruption. Somali pirates themselves may have shifted toward these other illicit activities after naval coalitions made traditional hijackings more dangerous. But the lessons of the day Xin Hai, the OS-35, and similar incidents remain relevant. The seas are vast, the opportunities for lawlessness are many, and the line between maritime crime and international conflict is often razor thin. China's evolution from a cautious negotiator in 2009 to an increasingly assertive maritime power by the 2020s mirrors broader changes in global naval politics. Once content to quietly pay ransoms, Beijing now projects strength, deploying advanced warships, aircraft, and even overseas bases to protect its shipping routes. Whether this is viewed as a stabilizing force or a strategic challenge depends largely on perspective. But for the pirates who once roamed the Indian Ocean with impunity, the message is clear. The era of easy pickings is over. The ocean still holds its dangers, but in these contested waters, fortune no longer favors the bold, it favors the prepared. And these days, China is very prepared. If you found this story fascinating and want to hear more about the high-stakes encounters, hidden histories, and real-life dramas shaping our world's most dangerous frontiers, make sure you subscribe. There's a lot more to uncover, and you won't want to miss what comes next.